I served 18 years in the military. 18. That's a long time to be away from home, to sleep with your boots on, to forget what silence sounds like. I wasn't some kind of hero or anything. I fixed things. Radios, wires, comms. Quiet work, but necessary. People don't notice you until the gear fails. I guess life's kind of like that too. When I got out, I was 42. Not too old, not too young, just misplaced. I tried a few things before settling into a job as a night security guard at a local middle school. It was peaceful work. Locking doors, checking halls, drinking bitter coffee from a chipped thermos. Nothing glamorous, but it paid regular, and I could sleep without worrying someone would try to blow up the barracks. My wife, Lydia, liked the routine at first. She said it made her feel safe. She always said that, safety, like it was some rare gem she could never quite hold on to. I met her just before deployment number 3. She was working at a library, studying interior design on the side. She had big eyes and a voice like calm water. When I came home, we married fast. We didn't really know each other, but I figured we'd learn. We never had kids. She said she wasn't ready, then later that it was too late. I didn't argue. Some things don't belong to you, even when you're part of them. The first 5 years were smooth enough. We lived in a small house I bought with my military savings. She painted the walls soft colors, bought throw pillows, changed the curtains with the seasons. I didn't understand any of it, but it made her happy, and I liked seeing her walk through the house like she owned it all. I think I mistook that for love. I kept my routines. Up at 6, coffee, check the yard, long walk, work at 4 in the afternoon. Night shifts. Lydia worked from home, freelance consultations, she called them. She had a few clients, mostly online stuff. Sometimes she'd stay up late on her laptop, sipping wine and whispering on calls. I didn't ask questions. I trusted her. Or maybe I just didn't want to disturb the still water. I started noticing small things maybe a year ago. Packages arriving more often. Clothes with tags I'd never seen before. Fancy shoes she wore only once. She'd say they were gifts from a friend, or that she got them on clearance. Once, a bill came in the mail from a credit card I didn't know we had. I asked about it. She said it was old, from before we married. Said not to worry. So I didn't. I worked, I paid the mortgage, I bought groceries. She handled everything else. That was her phrase. I'll handle everything else. And I let her. Because after a life of noise and chaos, I wanted peace. I didn't want fights about receipts and balances. I just wanted someone to keep the house warm and the evenings quiet. But peace can be a trap, too. A kind of soft prison you build with your own hands. 6 months ago, I got a call from the county clerk's office. They asked me to confirm my attendance at a court hearing. I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't done anything. I didn't even have a parking ticket. I asked what it was about, and the woman on the phone sighed like she hated her job and said, "Your wife has named you as a co-debtor on multiple accounts." I didn't know what that meant. Not really. So I went to the office and asked for the paperwork. It was a thick folder. I read it sitting in my car with the engine running. Apparently, we had over $38,000 in consumer debt. Credit cards, personal loans, furniture financing, all in both our names. All opened in the last 3 years. I'd never signed anything. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. Not from anger. Not yet. From something colder. That feeling when the ground shifts, and everything you thought was solid turns to air. When I got home that evening, I didn't storm in. I didn't yell. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and waited for her to come back from her yoga class. She was humming when she walked through the door. She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. Maybe for her, nothing was. I asked her calmly, "Lydia, what's all this debt?" She blinked like I'd spoken in another language. Then she laughed, not a full laugh, just a sharp little puff of air, and said, "Oh, that? It's nothing. Just some balances I moved around. Don't worry about it." I showed her the papers. She got quiet, then defensive, said I was overreacting, said I never wanted to be involved in the finances anyway, said I acted like a guest in my own life. That one stung. She turned it on me fast, made it sound like it was my fault she had to juggle so much, that I left her alone too long with the burden of managing everything, that I was emotionally unavailable. A ghost husband. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just nodded and went to bed. I didn't sleep much that night. I stared at the ceiling and listened to her phone buzz on the nightstand. In the morning, she was gone. Just a note on the table. Taking some space. Don't make this harder than it has to be. She didn't answer my calls, but the bills kept coming. And then, 3 weeks later, a notice of joint litigation. She had filed a petition to declare me legally responsible for half the debt, since the accounts were in both our names. That's when something shifted in me. I'd taken a lot in my life. Orders, punches, grief, loneliness. But betrayal from the one place you thought was safe, that's a different kind of wound. It doesn't bleed, but it doesn't close either. So I started collecting. Every receipt I could find. Every bank statement, email thread, tax return. I made copies. I highlighted. I built a quiet little war room in my garage. I didn't tell anyone, not even my brother, who usually knew when something was off. I just prepared, like we were taught. When the court date came, I wore my cleanest shirt and the old shoes I'd polished the night before. I didn't hire a lawyer. I didn't think I needed one. Lydia showed up with a woman in a navy pantsuit and a sour expression. She didn't look at me. That was fine. The judge asked if I had anything to say. I said, "No, Your Honor. I'll let the documents speak." And they did. The judge took his time going through the folder I'd handed over. I'd arranged it like a service report, chronological, clear, everything labeled. Statements showing the accounts were opened online without my knowledge. Transactions for furniture I'd never seen, airline tickets I hadn't used, subscriptions to things I couldn't even pronounce. I'd even printed out a snapshot of our living room. The same stained sofa from when I got back from the army. No new dining set. No flat screen TV. Just the quiet life I thought we were living. Lydia didn't say much at first. Her lawyer tried to frame me as passive and uninvolved in household financial decisions. They said it was fair I should share responsibility for the lifestyle she tried to maintain for both of us. The judge raised an eyebrow at that. He asked, was he aware of any of this debt at the time it was incurred? I sat still, eyes forward. Let the stack of paper and my clean record do the talking. Then came the final piece. I'd found emails, one she forgot to delete, from a shared laptop. She'd been sending requests to increase credit limits. Requests that included digital signatures. Hers, not mine. I printed those, too. The courtroom went quiet. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Lydia looked straight ahead. For a moment, I saw something like fear flicker across her face. Or maybe it was embarrassment. Hard to tell after so many years of trying to read a woman who never really let me in. The judge dismissed the majority of the claim against me. Said it was clear I hadn't participated knowingly in the accrual of debt. Said it appeared my wife had intentionally concealed financial activities. He didn't rule on fraud. That would take another court. But the weight of his words was enough. I wouldn't be held liable. I was free. After the hearing, I walked past Lydia without a word. Not to be cruel. Just, there was nothing left to say. I heard her call my name once. Quietly. But I didn't turn around. I just kept walking until I reached the parking lot, sat in my old pickup, and watched my own breath fog up the window. That was the last time I saw her. At least in person. The months after that were slow and hollow. Like winter stretching out too long. I didn't tell anyone the full story. At work, I said the marriage didn't work out. My brother asked if I wanted to move in with him for a while, but I said no. I preferred silence to sympathy. Besides, the house was still mine. Empty, sure, but mine. I cleaned out her things one box at a time. Makeup in the bathroom drawer. Books with folded pages. Her perfume still sat on the dresser, half full. I didn't throw it out. Just packed it gently and left it in the attic. I'm not sure why. Maybe I wanted to pretend I was the kind of man who could let go with grace. But truth is, I wasn't angry the way people expect. I didn't fantasize about revenge or confrontation. What I felt was disappointment. Heavy and cold. Like holding wet clothes in winter. You don't rage against it. You just carry it, bit by bit. One evening, I sat in the living room with the lights off. Just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the creak of the house settling. I poured myself a small glass of bourbon and stared at the front door. For a second, I imagined her walking in, saying it was all a mistake, that she wanted to fix things. And I realized, even if she did, I wouldn't let her. Not because I hated her, but because I couldn't afford to lie to myself again. Somewhere around February, I started going back to the base. Not for work, just a visit. Old buddies ran the Veterans Center there. They had coffee, old magazines, and a back room where we played cards like time had stopped in 1998. One of them, Paul, asked if I was still married. I said, not anymore. He nodded, like that made perfect sense. He didn't ask why. That's the thing about men like us. We don't dig unless you hand us the shovel. But later, when we were loading boxes for a local fundraiser, he said, "You look lighter." I asked what he meant. "Don't know," he shrugged. Like a man who dropped a heavy pack halfway through the march. He was right. I did feel lighter. Not happier. Just less burdened. Lydia tried to reach me twice. First by text, then by email. She said she was sorry for how things ended, that she was going through a confusing time, that she'd never meant to hurt me. I didn't reply. Some wounds don't bleed out loud. They just stop trusting. One night, she called. Her number wasn't saved in my phone, but I recognized it. I let it ring. Then I blocked it. She sent a letter a few weeks later. Handwritten. I read it once. It said she missed the version of me that didn't ask questions. That she panicked when money got tight and made some poor decisions. That she hoped I could understand, even if I never forgave. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and haven't opened it since. I don't burn bridges. I just let the wind erase the path behind me. Life got quieter after that. More deliberate. I fixed up the garage, built a shelf for my tools, started planting vegetables in the backyard. Not because I needed them, just because I wanted something to grow that I could trust. At the school, the kids never asked about my life. They just saw me as the guy with the keys and the calm voice. That was fine. One of the janitors, Javier, invited me to his daughter's quinceañera. I brought a small gift and stayed for cake. It was the first time in a long while that I saw people laugh without pretending. At night, I'd sit on the back porch with my old radio. Just static and talk shows. I liked the feeling of being small, invisible, and at peace. I thought about Lydia sometimes. Not with pain. Just as a chapter I'd closed. She probably told her friends I was cold, distant, unromantic. Maybe I was. But I never lied. I never took more than I gave. And when she needed silence, I gave that too. Funny thing is, when people think of betrayal, they picture fireworks. Yelling, throwing plates, slam doors. But the worst kind? The kind that really sticks? It's quiet. A slow drip. A gentle smile hiding a knife. And that kind of betrayal, it teaches you to love your solitude. Even when it's not what you asked for. Spring came late that year. The kind of spring that doesn't bloom, just stops raining. The ground outside my house stayed muddy well into May. I didn't mind. I liked the mess. It felt honest. By then, I'd settled into my new rhythm. Wake at noon, coffee, read a bit, check the mail, clean something, work my night shift, come home, eat quietly, and sleep in clean sheets. The kind of boring that's sacred when you've seen enough chaos to last 2 lives. Every so often, I'd get curious. Look her up online. Not in a desperate way, more like checking a wound to see if it still hurts. She'd deleted our photos, updated her profile picture, something professional. She'd started using her maiden name again, joined some design network. From what I could tell, she was fine. One time I saw a comment from a man on one of her posts. Flirty. She replied with a smile emoji. I closed the browser. I didn't feel jealousy, just something hollow and faintly amused. I wondered if she was telling him how hard her last marriage was, how she had to do everything herself. Maybe she left out the part where she forged signatures and spent our money on self-care retreats and hotel weekends alone. Or maybe she really believed it. People like her don't always lie. Sometimes they just see the world through a filter that keeps them the victim in every frame. I kept the court documents, tucked them in a box under the bed. Not for revenge, just for memory. Proof that I hadn't imagined the storm. That the silence I now lived in wasn't cowardice, but earned. One Saturday, I took the old pickup out to the edge of town. There's a diner near the highway that serves the best damn hash browns this side of the state. I sat by the window, watched trucks roll by. Across from me sat an older couple, maybe in their 70s. He poured her coffee, she cut his sausage. No words, just movements born of habit and years. I didn't envy them, but I did wonder what it took to build something that solid. What kind of woman would stick when life gets inconvenient? What kind of man listens when pride wants to shout? Back at the house, I started boxing up the last few things of hers I hadn't touched. A scarf she'd left on the coat rack. Her art books. A blanket she loved that I couldn't bring myself to use. I labeled the box with her name and a year. Drove it to her sister's place. Left it on the porch. No note. That night, I sat on the back steps with a beer. Looked up at the stars. Thought about the years I gave her. And how quiet the cost turned out to be. Some men leave with a bang. I left with a folder, a key, and a locked front door. About 2 weeks later, I got one final letter. Different handwriting. It was from her father. We'd never been close, but he respected me more than she ever did. He thanked me for not retaliating. Said he knew some of what happened. Said he was sorry for how she turned out. That part stuck with me. Not because I wanted vindication, but because even her own blood knew the shape of her storms. He included a photo, me and her, at our wedding, framed by oak trees and hope. He wrote, "You deserved better." I burned the photo that night. Not in anger, just to close the circle. A few days after, something happened that caught me off guard. I got a call from the school office. A kid had been caught trying to sneak in after hours. A boy. Said he knew me. When I came in, I saw him sitting on the bench. Red hoodie, scraped knee, pale face. It was Kevin, my neighbor's son. I used to fix his bike. He said he came by because his mom wouldn't listen, and he just needed someone who didn't yell. I took him home, made him tea. We sat in the garage while I cleaned a wrench. He talked. I listened. It was the first time in months that I felt useful. Not just functional, not just silent, but needed. Kevin kept coming by, helped me plant tomatoes, asked about tools. One day he asked, "You ever gonna date again?" I laughed harder than I had in years. He shrugged and said, "You'd be a good husband. For a better woman." Out of the mouths of kids. I'm not telling you this to get sympathy. or to paint myself as some noble ghost of a man who walks away without scars. I've got scars. I just don't pick at them anymore. That's what she taught me. She taught me that silence isn't weakness, that calm can be louder than rage, that some exits don't need slammed doors, just a steady hand on the knob and a heart that's done pretending. One morning, months after everything was settled, I sat on my porch and watched the mailman drop off a small envelope. Inside was a postcard. Paris. On the back, found this in a shop window. Made me think of you. Hope you're well. L. No return address. No apology. Just one last ripple in still water. I didn't respond. Instead, I flipped the card over, looked at the image, two people under an umbrella, walking toward a cathedral. And I smiled. Not for her, but for me. Because I didn't need that life anymore. Because I had found a kind of peace that didn't depend on anyone else staying or leaving. And because I knew whatever part of her once needed to be forgiven, I had already let it go the moment I walked out of that courtroom. Without a word. A year passed. Then two. The house stayed quiet. No echoes of arguments. No sounds of heels on tile. Just the whir of the fridge, the creak of old beams, the kind of silence that doesn't scream anymore. It just breathes. I kept my job. Moved to the day shift eventually. Principal said I had a calming presence around the kids. I took that as the highest kind of compliment. Kevin, the boy from next door, came by less often as he got older. Found new distractions. Girls, football, things boys are supposed to find. But sometimes I'd still see him across the fence, wave, and he'd nod back like we shared a secret the world didn't deserve. One summer, I repainted the walls. Changed the color from pale blue to something warmer. Something like clay. I planted wildflowers in the front yard. Put wind chimes out by the shed. I'm not sure when it started to feel like mine again, but one morning I woke up, and it just did. I never saw Lydia again. Never chased her down. Never checked if she found love or bankruptcy. Whatever happened to her, it was no longer my story to carry. She had become just another person in the world, someone who once shared a bed with me and now wouldn't recognize my laugh if she heard it on the street. Sometimes I'd still get that old urge to explain myself, to write down everything, to say, this is what really happened. Not for her. Not even for the courts. Just to feel like someone might understand that I wasn't the villain in her narrative. But I didn't. Because at some point, peace stopped being something I ran to and started being something I protected. One winter, the local community center started a class for veterans, woodworking, and repairs. Nothing fancy. Just a few old guys with tools and stories and rough hands that still knew how to shape things. I signed up. Not because I needed to learn anything, but because I missed the sound of sawdust falling and someone saying, nice work, man. There, I met a woman named June. She wasn't young. She wasn't loud. She didn't try to fix me or fill the silence. She just listened. Her husband had passed away 3 years before. Cancer. They'd been married 27 years. She spoke about him with the kind of fondness that didn't sting anymore, just warmed the room. We shared coffee after class a few times. Then dinner. She liked old books and kept her sweaters folded in perfect stacks. Her laugh didn't ask for attention. It just came out when it wanted to. One evening, she asked me if I'd ever been married. I said, yes. She didn't ask why it ended. That's when I knew she was the kind of person I could trust with the quiet parts of me. We didn't fall in love fast, or even loudly. It was more like drifting toward each other in the same small boat after a storm neither of us wanted to name. She never tried to replace anything, and I never asked her to fill any spaces. She just sat across from me in the evening light and existed. Honestly, kindly. And that was more than enough. Lydia never sent another letter. No birthday texts. No calls on Christmas. Nothing. And I'm grateful for that. Because not all wounds need closure. Some just need clean air and distance. And I've had enough of both. A few months ago, I drove out past the edge of town. Found a plot of land near an old river bend. Nothing special. Just grass, trees, and the sound of birds that don't ask for anything. I bought it. I plan to build a small cabin there. Nothing fancy. Just enough space for a bed, a stove, a table, and 2 chairs. One for me. One for whoever wants to sit without pretending. I'll plant herbs out front. Keep a shed full of tools. Maybe even teach some of the neighborhood boys how to fix things, the kind of things schools don't teach anymore. I don't need much. Just space to breathe. Space to be the man I became after everything fell apart and didn't kill me. They say betrayal changes a man. I used to think that meant bitterness, anger, vengeance. But I've learned something else. Sometimes betrayal strips you down to the barest parts, the bones of who you are. And if you're lucky, if you're quiet enough, you find out that who you are is still good, still strong, still worth building a life around. Even if no one's clapping, even if no one's watching, even if the only person who ever truly understands is the one sitting alone on the porch watching the light change. So if you ask me now, years later, what would you have done differently? I'd say nothing. Not because it didn't hurt. Not because I didn't deserve better. But because walking away with my dignity, with no screaming, no revenge, no theatrics, was the most powerful thing I've ever done. And some nights, when the wind hits the trees just right, I remember that silence, that courtroom, that moment I handed the judge a folder. And finally, chose myself, without saying a word.